I'm excited here to speak with Gretchen, the president of the iF3 International Functional Fitness Federation. And of course, everybody I'm sure that has followed the iF3 has heard that iF3 Worlds have been canceled, which is sad for all of us that were excited to watch it, and especially I'm sure the athletes that were going to participate in it. But you also followed that up with the season is not over. And so one of the things I want to talk to you about today was you had mentioned several events, and I don't know if you're referring to what has been announced about the Masters World Cup and the Continental Cup, which we're going to get into here in a minute, but whether or not there was other events too that maybe you guys had planned and just haven't announced yet. So if we can, let's backtrack to the cancellation itself. How did you guys finally just decide December's not going to work? We're just gonna have to cancel it for this year?
Yeah, so basically kind of what we have is we have a planning group for Worlds, and we have monthly meetings. So every month, we're getting together and kind of looking at the situation, going through the different factors and trying to, hopefully the intent was always to keep pushing forward and keep planning the event as scheduled. But this last meeting that we had, we got information from the province of British Columbia, which is where we were planning to have the event, which had their reopening plan had been announced, and live sporting events, with crowds wasn't planned until stage 4, and also international tourism wasn't planned to be allowed till stage 4, and there was no set timeline on that. Kind of the criteria they had given was, well, stage 4 isn't happening until a vaccine or a treatment or herd immunity is achieved for the coronavirus. So looking at that, obviously people weren't willing to rent venues with those kind of stipulations in place. And we didn't want to proceed in a way that we thought would be misleading to the athletes, right? To act like we were planning an event when we didn't know if we could get a venue in place. We didn't know if it would be legal or safe for the athletes to come compete. So we made the decision that, look, we need to give athletes lead time. We need to let them know what's going on. We have our national federations that we're accountable to. They have their national championships to plan. They have flights to book. They have to make their plans. So we had a lot of people to think about. And we thought that earlier notice would be better. Obviously, we always want to have live in-person events. They're fun and they're amazing and they're great for the athletes. But it just didn't make sense, in this situation to try to push it and then have to pull the plug on the last minute. So we decided we would make the more, I don't know if I'd say conservative, but the smarter decision to cancel and put the athletes' rights at the forefront and try to keep them, keep their safety in mind and make sure everybody knew what was going on and why we made the decision. But that's kind of how we went about it.
So I'm curious because I saw comments on other events and other sporting events that people just suggested, well, did you guys consider moving it to a country that maybe hadn't been affected as much by the coronavirus, or the travel restrictions weren't as much there? So was there any thought to moving it outside of Canada at all?
It's not really, we didn't really talk about that as much. I mean, it came up a little in our conversation, but the big thing for us, right, even if you move it to a country where, okay, say it's legal to have the event here and we can have it, there are still a lot of countries that wouldn't be able to travel to it. A lot of countries still have travel bans in place in terms of people leaving their countries, right? And we didn't feel like it would be fair to have an event where you only have certain countries that could come because of these travel restrictions. It's supposed to be the World Championships, and in our view, that means all the countries that have federations are allowed to participate. And if, we didn't want to have an event that was, it's just the Americans and the Canadians, or, it's only the Europeans this year. And that's really not what our World Championships is about. So we didn't want to sacrifice really what the event means just for the sake of having an event. So that was kind of why we didn't really consider that option too much.
Okay, so I'm gonna put you on the spot here because I have some opinions and some thoughts, but I'm curious about yours. The way you're looking at me now, you're probably thinking, all right, I know what's coming. But so the CrossFit Games, right? So they last year, they make a big push. They have the national champions. They're invited to the games. So you kind of restructured last year to include as many countries that had an affiliate as possible. But then this year, because of everything that's going on, they've limited it to the 30 athletes get an invite, reset everything, no national champions. So what are your thoughts there? I mean, what was your thought as a former games athlete, and then the current president of iF3? What was your take on that?
Yeah, as a former games athlete, I understand the perspective of being incredibly devastated if the event were to be canceled. So I think from that perspective, if I was in the shoes of someone who had qualified to the games and still had a chance to go, I would be incredibly grateful to still have that opportunity. But on the opposite side of that, if I was one of those athletes who had an invite that suddenly was retracted, I would be, probably a little bit bitter about that fact, losing that. But I can see, from the athlete perspective, I mean, we can look at the NCAA this year. I was a collegiate gymnast, so I follow that still closely and watched as an incredibly talented class of senior athletes lost not only their season, but the rest of their sport forever, right? As that, for gymnastics at least, right? The NCAA sports pulled the plug right before nationals. And like, that's just devastating, yeah. Right? As an athlete, something you train your whole life for, like train years for. So as an athlete perspective, I think allowing these athletes still an opportunity to do the work and have some sort of event is a really great thing for them to try to do, as long as they can do it safely. So I can see that from the athlete perspective, being grateful for the opportunity, assuming you were one of those very, very few that still have that could have that opportunity. But there are those athletes where the plug did get pulled on them, and from a fairness perspective, that's very, very tough. And that I guess kind of flows more into my view now as, president of the iF3, where you have to look at not just the rights of the top athletes, but the rights of all the athletes, and the integrity of sport and fairness of sport. So that's a big thing for us is, really, if this is a sport, there are rules and there have to be standards and there have to be kind of things that we're trying to meet and make sure that there is some sort of bounds around this sport and the rules that we play by, and that it's not done on a whim. So I think those, is there a right or wrong answer? If they can do it safely and legally, hey, more power to them.
Do you still think that it's the fittest in the world, though? I mean,
I think that's the tough question, right? Like the same thing for us, where we couldn't, we didn't know if we could get all the athletes there to Worlds, right? There are probably some athletes who rightly are on their spot and should be at the competition, who may not be able to get there for other reasons. But I guess the thing we have to say with the CrossFit Games, it's never really claimed that everybody was there. I mean, there was always kind of that qualifying process where, you could say this about almost any sporting event, due to injury or not qualifying or just choosing not to participate that year, or someone goes team, are the best athletes really there every single year? No, but it's the fittest of who showed up or who could make it. And I guess that comes down to the question of what obligation does CrossFit have, or any organization have, to make sure that the best athletes are all getting there and have the opportunity to get there. So it's a hard question. I don't know if there's a right answer. The stress I imagine for them to trying to put on an event, not really knowing what's going to happen in the next couple months, good for them for taking that on. But I think it does, it's tough to say. And I don't know. Yeah. It's really hard because I think for me, I guess the big thing is when looking at a decision like that is kind of the rules of the sport and making sure what your priorities are. And for us, our priority is, okay, what is the thing that's most fair to the athletes? And that's not just one or two athletes, that's all the athletes. And, that's, I think, how kind of these decisions should be made. Fairness to the athletes, safety of the athletes. I can't speak for their decision-making process and whether that was the priority and how they made the decision, but I think that probably in true sport, I think that should be the thing that's at the forefront.
Yeah. And again, I have my personal views, and I won't elaborate too much on that here because it's not really the place for that. But I do hate it for all the athletes that aren't going to be able to make it. And I do see, for the most part, to their credit, to the athletes' credit, I have seen mostly all positive videos and posts and things along those lines that these athletes are coming out and saying. So I give them credit for that. If it was me and I felt like I'd worked and hard enough to achieve that, I would have a hard time, just sitting there and smiling. But hey, life goes on. So back to what we're talking about here with the iF3 Continental Cup this December. Let's tackle that first. So give us a brief rundown. What is the Continental Cup? What's it going to look like? And I have some questions about kind of the live portion of it that maybe we can elaborate a little bit more on.
Sure. Yeah. So our Continental Cup is basically for our athletes that would have been at Worlds in Canada. So it's going to be individual men, individual women, and teams of 4 in that competition. So the selection process for that event will look essentially the same as how the athletes are selected or would have been selected for Worlds. So meaning it will be up to each national federation to select their contingent of athletes for the Continental Cup. So they can select up to 3 men, 3 women, and a team of 4. The thing that I guess may be a little different in their selection process, because of the way we're doing the live portion of the event, the team athletes are going to have to be in one gym, right, in the same facility to do that live portion. So that may affect the way some countries pick their teams. Maybe not so much for smaller countries, but for a big country like, a USA or Canada that has a lot of land mass, it might affect picking, instead of picking people from all over, that you pick people who are maybe located in the same area geographically. But that's how we're picking those athletes for that event. The format is essentially the same in terms of number and style of tests. So it's still going to follow our 6-test format. But we're condensing the timeline. So instead of doing 6 tests over an entire weekend, it's going to be a 2-hour block of time. And there's 2 rounds, a preliminary and then a final. We're doing them on subsequent weekends. So it'll actually be two weekends long. So the preliminary round, you're broken up by continent roughly. We had to mix the groups a little bit just based on our federation numbers. So, Australia down in kind of the Oceania region, we only have a federation in Australia. So we can't let them compete against just themselves for the first round. So we're combining them with, some of the countries in Asia and Africa so that we have a little bit fairness in number of countries. So you'll compete with your continent for the first round, and we broke it into, I think it's 4 groups.
4 regions.
Yeah, 4 regions essentially. We're calling them continents. They're really kind of regions this year. As we grow, I hope we can continue this format, and then it'll really be continental. But it is kind of regional, probably is a better term for this year. So you'll be assigned a time block essentially. The Americas, we're going at 9 a.m. Let's say at 9 a.m. your job as the athlete is to show up on Zoom. Workouts will be announced, early, so everyone will know the workout and they'll know the expected setup for your equipment. So to try to make it fair, right, we'll try to say, all right, your rower has to be positioned this way compared to your pull-up bar or whatever, so that everything is as fair as we can get it, considering we're not all in the same space. And then we'll have somebody who's on here kind of being on Zoom, being the streaming platform.
So will it be Zoom?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the plan for now. We're leaning towards that, but we're still kind of exploring. But and Zoom is honestly pretty easy to use, and pretty easy for us to then stream to Facebook. So that's kind of the way we're leaning at the moment, but we'll see how it progresses in the next couple of months. But everyone will hop on, give people time to get settled, and then we're going to have someone who's kind of like the MC who will coordinate. And essentially, we'll have a time, all right, at this time we're starting, 3, 2, 1, go, do the first workout. And the MC will flow them through all 6 over the 2 hours. But everyone will complete all 6 workouts over the 2 hours. Then they'll have to enter their scores online in as real time as we can get it. There'll probably be some after entering of scores. So that's with your continent, right? And then
if you don't mind, make sure I'm understanding correctly then. So each region or continent will have an allotted time slot, so 2 hours. So the Americas have 2 hours, 9 to 11. And in that, every athlete from that continent will be competing at the same time live?
We'll break it up. So break it up by also your gender category, right? And teams.
Okay.
So 2 hours, it'll be America's, men 9 to 11, right?
Okay.
And then, let's say we're going to do men one day, women one day, teams one day. So all the men for the continents will go, right, one day on, say, like Friday. All the women will go on Saturday. All the teams will go on Sunday. So it'll be the whole weekend, but you're only competing one day in your 2 hour block of time. So we're roughly expecting, last year, if we look at our numbers, we had like 40 men, 30 women competing at Worlds in Sweden for the individuals, and then 12 teams, I think. So we're expecting roughly a little bit bigger numbers, but if you divide those numbers up across the continents, we don't anticipate that there'll be more than, in the preliminary round, it'll be, a little bigger athletes maybe, but no more than 20 athletes on here at a time. Whereas the finals is going to be lower numbers, right? Because it's only your top three.
So will the full 2 hours be streaming then?
Yep, that's the plan.
Okay. All right. So let's say you wanted to watch all the athletes in all the continents. You can watch every athlete that will be competing from anywhere in the world. It's kind of cool. It's different than if it was Worlds, if the event was live. I don't know, maybe you guys would be streaming that all live too. But to be able to watch every athlete like that would be difficult. So, yeah. I mean, that's a plus.
Yeah, so it is. I mean, the hard thing will be those preliminary rounds where we have more athletes, the visual of seeing everybody. Because that screen gets really small when you have all those people on Zoom. But we're going to work on it and see and try to make it as visually appealing as possible.
Yeah, and maybe, I don't know the capabilities, but I would think that it would be possible for somebody somewhere to be able to select different athletes to kind of highlight them throughout, to pick them out of the gallery, if that would make sense.
Yeah, we'll have to see on that how we
Yeah.
can do that. We've got time. I mean,
Sure.
hopefully we have time to experiment with kind of platform capabilities and see what we can come up with.
So what about judges? Will there be judges on site and then as well somebody judging the live videos, or?
Yeah, the plan is they're going to have to be responsible for having an official there with them in the gym, and that official is responsible for obviously judging them during the event. And we're going to require that those officials have taken kind of our basic TO course, and we'll probably have them do at least some sort of meeting or trying to get together with them and go through standards beforehand, just so everybody who is judging knows that there's expectations. And I think the general plan too is to probably have a TO that's in the Zoom call as well, kind of overseeing in general as much as possible, just watching the whole thing. But yeah, the athletes will be responsible for having a TO with them in the gym.
I mean, I imagine that, you're talking about even the way that they're aligning the rower next to the rig or whatever it may be. I mean, that's smart. That way you can kind of keep it consistent, and it'd be probably more visually appealing as well. But I would think it would be important too to make sure that everybody, when they go to set up, you can actually see them, right? We don't have that camera where you see like half of their reps or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that'll be included in, kind of included in the whole, when we release what the tests are going to be, here's a test, here's how you set up your camera, here's how you set up your equipment, and that obviously that kind of trying to be that specific is going to limit us a little bit in terms of what can be programmed, right? Because it has to be something everyone generally has in their gym and that everyone's going to be able to set up consistently space-wise.
Yeah. Well, and, sometimes your more straightforward workouts are some of the best to just test. You don't have to be too crazy and too creative. I think maybe we talked about that last time we talked, some of the crazy workouts have been programmed, but so, all right. So we're talking about the preliminary round, and then you'll have a live finals. Now, what's different? How many people make it to that live finals round?
Yeah. So the format, 6 tests, 2 hours, same thing. So same structure, but we're just taking the top 3 from each continent. So top 3 men, women, and right now we're saying same thing, top 3 teams. We'll see what the numbers look like on teams, just because of the added difficulty of making sure your team is all in the same room together, So we may have to change the numbers on teams depending on number of entries, but the plan right now is top 3 from that preliminary round. So just in your session, you have to be top 3 in your session, and then you'll move on to the live final, which is going to be the following weekend. We plan to do that just in one day. So, you know,
everything you're talking about, men, women, and teams would be in one day?
Because it'll just be one session. The final, all the men will be in one session, right? Final men, immediately followed by, let's say, final women and final teams. I don't know if we're going to do that order, but
so it'll be 6 hours of live streaming.
6 hours of live streaming. Yeah, that's the plan.
Get your popcorn ready.
Right.
All right. So then, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the winner from the Continental Cup will receive an invite to 2021 automatically?
Yes. So for the individuals, for individual men and individual women, they'll get an invite to 2021 automatically. And that invite is with the individual only. So if that individual chooses not to go or gets injured, that invite's not going to pass on. And that invite will also not count against their country. So let's say a guy from Norway wins for the men. That doesn't count against Norway's 3 spots that they would normally have at 2021 Worlds. They can still select 3, but they have this extra guy who earned his spot from the Continental Cup, so they would technically have 4 athletes there. Next year.
It's not a federation invite. It's an athlete specific invite. So that's the distinction there.
Yeah, exactly. And then we're not doing that for the teams because we wanted to keep it, one country, one team for the team competition at Worlds 2021. But we're going to try to put together a nice prize package so that the teams are still competing have some prize. I mean, obviously we're going to have the title of Intercontinental Champion is the title we're using. So that's what they'll be when they win. And we'll definitely be sending out like trophies and things like that. But we're trying to work with some sponsors to actually have a little bit of swag that they get as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure they'll appreciate that. But I mean, the title in itself would be something to strive for. All federations. And so, we've talked about the different continents or regions, if you will. Have you heard back? Are there federations that will not be participating or possibly can't participate because of limitations? Or is it too far out to know for sure?
I think it's a little too far out to know for sure. But nobody has told us that they can't participate. We've had, pretty positive feedback from all the federations so far that they plan to participate and they, feel comfortable with the decision and understand why we canceled Worlds. And, I think there's obviously all the federations still were worried about planning their nationals anyways, right? And they still are worried about doing that, So I think it's probably, I don't want to say it's a relief because it's, everyone really wanted it to happen, but I think it's just a little helpful now to the national federations to have a little of that stress off in terms of getting their championships done, getting flights for the athletes, all of that. Now they have a little less stress on their plates and they can focus on really doing great national events and still having a way for their athletes to compete and represent their country.
All right, so let's move on to Masters. So the Masters is not called the Continental Cup, it's called the World Cup?
Yes, we're calling that the World Cup.
Okay.
We're not breaking them up by continents. So their structure is a little different and they're a little earlier in the year. So they'll start in September and it's going to be, the first phase for them is just a normal traditional online qualifier. We're giving them the entire month of September to do it. So we'll have 6 tests and you've got all of September. Go do the 6 tests in your gym, whatever days, whatever order, as many times as you want, and put your scores in online, just the way you kind of normally would, scores and videos. And we're opening that registration up to anyone who would like to register and compete in that preliminary round. So you don't have to, qualify through your national federation. So anyone can go and sign up for that. The caveat to that being, if you are not part of a national federation, you can't move on to the final round. So if there's someone who wants to compete, their country's not part, yet of our system, they can do that prelims, but you can't move on to the final. So once they do the preliminary round, we'll take the top 5 in each age group, and we'll do the same kind of idea that we're doing with the individuals and teams. The live final will be on a streaming platform. That timeline will be in November. So qualifier in September, and then final for them, live final will be in November. Shortening the time a little bit for the Masters, try to control their volume a little more. We're going to go 90 minutes for them and just do 4 tests, so they don't have to do all 6. So we're cognizant of that they are a little older, so we don't want to crush them with all 6.
I'm just laughing because I'm technically a Masters athlete, so I'm just laughing. No, it's a good thing though. So do you know then a couple of things? Do you know what 2 tests will be cut out? Has that been discussed?
Yes, we have discussed it, and I think the plan right now is to do endurance, strength, body weight, and mixed. I believe that's what we decided on for the 4. So essentially cutting out skill and power. So that's the general plan at the moment.
Okay. And then, so the major distinction really between the Masters World Cup and the Continental Cup would be, I guess, 1, the regions, the continents, but then 2, you don't have that live preliminary event. It's an online qualifier.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically.
So will there be any, I'm sorry, I was waiting on the response because I forget we're still on audio too. So some people may not be able to see you shaking your head. So what about teens? Did I miss something on that, or
no, you didn't miss it.
Or
yeah, it didn't get, I mean, we hadn't officially announced it. I think we had said little things here or there. Yes, we're having a teens event, but we haven't officially announced details. I can tell you now because I had a call about it earlier today, so I feel more comfortable now that we can talk about it, because I wanted to hammer out some of the details first with our youth committee leaders before we announced it. But it will essentially mimic the timeline for Masters. We're going to put their timeline in sync with the Masters, and it'll kind of mimic what the Masters World Cup looks like, in the sense that the first part's a traditional online qualifier. The teams are only doing 4 tests in the online qualifier, but they'll have, the whole month of September to do their 4. And then same thing, top 5 in those age groups will go on to the live final. And same structure there. They're going to do only 4 tests in the live final. We're talking about shortening theirs to 4 tests in an hour, though, instead of an hour and a half. We'll see. It just depends. We might go, if we go a little longer, it's just because we need buffer time between age groups to get people set up on either end. But they're essentially mimicking kind of what the Masters are doing. So they'll have that event. We'll have an official social media announcement sometime soon on that.
Okay.
But that is the plan for our teams.
Okay, so it won't be part of the Masters World Cup. It'll be its own event, but it'll follow the same. So September qualifier, November live event.
Yeah.
Different day though in November?
Probably just because of the number of age groups, right? So we have I think 8 Masters age groups. So if you're looking at an hour and a half for 8 Masters, and then we got to put in an extra 2 teen groups, it's just a long day of someone we're streaming it, and then someone who has to be on here being the MC and all of that. So we'll probably try to do a different weekend for the teens, just because otherwise it's going to be a lot.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, logistically, it seems like a lot anyways. So I certainly understand that. So what about the Masters and the teens? Will they get a qualifying spot to 2021?
Masters, yes. They're going to get first place will get a qualifying spot to 2021, and the Masters Worlds still in Portugal for 2021. That's the event that got postponed, our Masters Worlds, which we're doing in coordination with TIFISA, the International Sports for All Association. So yes, Masters, same kind of concept. That spot will not count against their country, right? Not count against their federation spots if they win that. Teens, we have not really discussed that yet because we haven't really made the plan for the teen competition for 2021 Worlds and exactly what that looks like. So I guess at the moment, still kind of up in the air what the teens are getting, because we still need to do a little bit of planning of for what the teens look like and where they're going to be situated for their worlds in 2021.
All right, so I'm going to circle back around to something because I meant to ask you this earlier and I got sidetracked. But the 6 tests in 2 hours, talking about now the Continental Cup, what does that look like? I mean, I'm trying to, as an athlete, I'm trying to think, and not an athlete on this elite level by any means. Don't let me confuse you. But what does that look like? I mean, you're talking about 6 different workouts in a 2-hour period. Is there built-in rest in between? Is it going to be like one rolling event? I assume not, but any idea what that'll look like?
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be at least some breaks in between, because there will be points where you're going to have to set up different equipment, right? You know, whether it's changing weights or just moving things around in a certain way. So they'll have to be built in time to kind of allow the athletes to do that. And in all honesty, we don't have the programming finalized yet, so I can't give a 100% for sure answer. But, you know, the plan is sort of at least the kind of way that I visualize in my head. And I don't sit on the programming committee, so they do most of the programming, and I just occasionally chime in if I think something is logistically not going to happen. But I think there'll be kind of some built-in breaks there, right? Well, you see, okay, well, there might be some that flow, but generally, all right, we did the endurance test, and okay, at this, you know, this minute mark, we're starting this test, and we have to kind of keep everything organized, at least a little, so it doesn't look, well, we don't want it to be like a free-for-all where athletes are confused about what's happening as they're going through the session.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because I was just thinking, all right, 6 tests. I mean, if you do 6 20-minute, you're at your 120-minute. Not that everyone would be 20 minutes, but it's not inconceivable to have a 20-minute test, right, and then turn around and you know, what do you take a 10-minute break, and then you got 10 minutes left before that 20-minute block is up. So I was just thinking through, as somebody that's done a couple of competitions, what that would look like, and mentally preparing for that. It would look different than if you were over a 3-day weekend or even a 2-day weekend or something along those lines. Yep. So the last question I really had was that in your initial video, and I mentioned this earlier about the cancellation of iF3 Worlds, you said that the season is not over, that there's several other events. So can you clarify, were you talking about the Continental Cup as well as the Masters World Cup and the Teens World Cup, or are there other events planned as well?
Nope. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The Continental, Masters, and the Teens, and then honestly, we're pretty much at the end of the year then, since with doing the Continental Cup in December. So then it's, you know, getting into next year, and then planning for Masters Worlds 2021, which will be in June, which will be our only Masters Worlds event that year. And then we're looking at kind of an Augusty, late August timeframe for 2021 Worlds in Australia.
Okay, so Australia 2021, Portugal again for the delayed, not canceled Masters event. And then just out of curiosity, as far as planning goes, what are you even doing for 2021? How do you look at that? It's got to be still in the back of your minds of any event that we plan, we still have to be flexible and prepare for our current world status to continue, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's always kind of in the back of our minds at this point. But the best we can do is kind of keep moving forward and planning as if everything is going to go ahead, you know, and we'll see. I mean, the situation in the world is changing so rapidly. It's changing every day. And our events are now so far away, we really can't make any decisions without having, you know, better information. And I think that's, you know, one of the hardest parts about this whole situation in general, is that trying to get good information and accurate information about the situation in the world in order to make those decisions. So for now, for 2021, we plan everything as if it's going ahead without a hitch, and, we can reassess probably not really till the end of 2020 to see where things are.
Right. Yeah, I don't envy you in that matter of trying to plan something in the current environment. It's been tough. There's so many events that wanted to hang on and postpone and postpone. And that's one thing that I appreciated about what y'all did, and going ahead and coming out early and saying, look, it's May, but in December, we're still, we're not going to be able to do this. But it takes, like you said, it's not that you feel relieved, but at least you can kind of nail that in the coffin and move on and start planning on what you can control and move forward.
Exactly. And it's even, and for us too, one of the considerations, really, when we even postponed Worlds, we were supposed to be having in August, right? The initial postponement to November, the conversation was less around the virus, right? And then more around gyms are closing. Are our athletes going to have time to train and show up and be in shape enough to have this competition and perform safely, right? Because that's a consideration too, right? People have been out of the gym, and some people are very lucky to have a lot of equipment at home and training regularly, but that's not the case for everybody, in our federations and everywhere in the world. So, that's a consideration as well when we're looking at these events. And it's not just, okay, can I have an event? It's, can I have athletes show up who are prepared to compete at that level and perform at that level, and that's a big safety concern as well,
Yeah, and it's so different. You're on a world level, and for other podcasts, I've talked to different people that have been in different countries and are in different countries, and it's just the environment is so different in some countries you're allowed like 1 hour a day to go out for exercise, and that's it. So if you don't have, how could you have a barbell and, dumbbells and whatever in your house? You're very, very limited. And some people are still in that situation. So we look around and Florida just, I think, opened gyms back up this past week. I think there's still North Carolina or somewhere that still has gyms closed. So it's just so different everywhere, but really in the United States, I think that we're still fortunate that we've been able to do as much as we have. And there's a lot of other countries out there that just haven't had those same opportunities.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get off too far on that. Anything else going on with iF3 that would be good to know, or we should be looking out for, other than more details about these events?
Yeah, I think our big focus right now is getting the events planned, making sure the athletes still have a good season to look forward to and have an opportunity to represent their country. So that's kind of our big focus. Right now it's, we're using a little bit of the downtime to try to focus on making some improvements on our technical officials course, making some improvements to our movement standards document and making that a little easier to read and understand and a little less wordy. And then working, behind the scenes on some of our governance stuff. So all of that stuff is maybe less exciting, but kind of stuff that makes our organization stronger. So we're working on that internally. But for the big exciting things, it's really just planning the events and making sure that we have some cool new things to play with. This, kind of new 2-hour format to play around with this year will be fun. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be great. 2 hours, six workouts, 6 tests. I'm looking forward to it as a fan to be able to watch. So thank you for your time, Gretchen. Appreciate it as always. Looking forward for more information. Of course, if we can help out, let us know in distributing that, and have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you. You too.